Call the meeting to order. Our first item is our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America,
the Republic,
and to the republic for which it stands,
and under
one
God,
nation,
indivisible,
God, indivisible,
liberty and justice.
liberty and justice.
I do have a statement to read. Due to the current federal and state emergency declarations, a Minnesota directive for residents to stay at home and guidance about limiting person-to-person contact due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this meeting of the Marshall School Board is being conducted in accordance with Minnesota Statute 13D.021, meetings by telephone or other electronic means. Due to the health pandemic, the school board determined that it's not feasible for the public to attend this meeting at the regular meeting location due to the health pandemic. Persons may monitor this meeting from a remote location by watching live on Studio One TV, Facebook page, through the Studio One TV website, or on cable television channel 180, on Charter, or channel 17 on VAST. School board members are reminded to mute their microphone or phone when they are not speaking. School board members wishing to speak should state their name and then wait to be recognized by the chair. When recognized, a board member should speak and then mute their device. If there are multiple board members wishing to speak, the chair will determine the order in which board members wishing to speak will be recognized. All votes will be conducted by roll call vote through an electronic school board. Each member will vote, and results of each member vote will be displayed. Persons monitoring this meeting from a remote location may submit a comment by emailing schoolboard@marshall.k12.mn.us. This meeting is being recorded. Access to the recordings will be made available on the Studio One TV website as soon as it is reasonably possible. Mr. Vice Chair, read our mission statement.
The mission of the Marshall Public School District is to educate, support, and prepare all learners for success.
Thank you. Approval of the agenda. I'll make a motion to approve the agenda. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any additions? Hearing none, please vote. It is approved. Presentation. Welcome, Tiffany and Amanda. I'll turn it over to you guys.
Thank you so much. I'll get us started. I just wanted to give a brief update on distance learning and what it looks like in early childhood. First, I wanted to highlight our attendance. Our program that we are running every day through distance learning is our voluntary pre-K program, and that's our 4-year-old preschool, along with our birth through age 5 early childhood special education programs. And our average of attendance is about 96% each day, or overall for the weeks, and I think that's really pretty good. How we're taking attendance at this time is each individual teacher will send a question of the day, and a parent or a child care provider, whoever's helping the child, then responds each day on what the child submits for an answer, and that's how we're taking our attendance right now. In regards to what distance learning looks like in early childhood, we don't have the one-to-one devices that we send home with our students, so we are relying heavily on our parents and childcare or whoever's taking care of the young children right now to work with the students and help them get onto the Seesaw app, which is something new that staff put together and sent the information out to families to sign up. And so that's been a really great technology tool where we can get information out to the students and families, and they're able to respond and have that opportunity to share information back and forth. And then I just wanted to highlight, right now, the programs that are not running are all of our new ECFE classes that were not able to start before COVID-19 started here in Marshall or for our nation. And that's primarily just due to you need to kind of build that relationship with families to kind of have an open communication forum for that parent education piece. And so they were, will receive refunds from Marshall Community Services for those classes. Classes that are running are ECFE classes that had already started prior, and they were able to build kind of some momentum and relationships with the parents. And we're using an online Facebook private group to meet and connect with families. And we're using Teams as well. We are also running, again, our voluntary pre-K program and our ECSE program that's birth to 5. And then for our 3s preschool, our proposal then is refunds for the months that students are not here at school, but our staff felt strongly to still give our families distance learning tools. So they were given all of the weeks of school distance that they would be missing out, distance learning materials to do at home. It's an optional opportunity, and then they still can have the resources to communicate back and forth with teachers.
Very good.
Any questions that you have?
Any questions, board members? Thank you.
Thank you.
Amanda, welcome.
Hello. So just to give a little bit of updates from Mae Tech. Mae Tech is using a modified schedule for our distance learning plan, very similar to the high school. Our students are meeting with their teachers 2 times a day, and we have it alternating days for their blocks. Our staff are working hard to connect with the students every single day. I have to give a huge shout out to my staff for all the work that they've been doing to contact kids. Our attendance, we have about 3 or 4 kids that each week we really struggle with getting them to connect with their teachers, and so it's more of us really reaching out to them. We continue to work with them and their families. We're at about, we hover right around the 88 to 89% attendance rate. So we're still working on some things there with our attendance. Overall, things are going fairly well here. A couple challenges, we still hear some tech issues from our students, just with microphones not working. And then just the motivation for our students to try to keep them motivated and engaged in the learning. So those are things that I think that probably everybody in the state are seeing. And so there are areas that we're just trying to be creative with. And then just getting all of our students and families to really understand the plan. We've been working to plan conferences in a virtual format. And so trying to figure out how that's going to look and work. And in reaching out to the families to see when we can contact them and what works best. A lot of them are just sharing that they are kind of overwhelmed with everything that's going on. So really listening to them right now in their feedback and trying to figure out what we can do to help support them. Some of our positives when we do connect with staff, I had the opportunity to jump into some virtual team meetings last week. And when you hear the students saying, we miss school, we want to be back in school, that's a really good thing. And so just speaks volumes to the connections that the staff have made with students throughout the year. Connecting with our students, again, our teachers are doing a phenomenal job of that. And then students have really said they appreciate the 2 classes a day model, so they're not so overwhelmed and then trying to figure out the work for the week. Moving forward, we're still working on figuring out a plan for graduation for our students. Mae Tech students, I've been working with the high school as well with graduation and prom ideas. But also on the radar for me here is what will summer school look like? Having some conversations with Jeremy on summer school planning. And then We also have the daycare here. Our daycare is still open at Mae Tech. We have seen a little drop in the numbers at the daycare. And so just trying to keep our staff busy. Our staff here have been doing a phenomenal job of helping keep things clean and disinfected to keep everybody healthy and safe, monitoring as kids are coming in. They really stepped up to the plate to do above and beyond to ensure that everybody is safe in the daycare as well. They've also been helping clean and organize a bunch of things that we just typically don't have the time to do because we're usually very, very busy. So we continue to, I work with Carol once a week to meet, and we talk about the different things that we need to work on the daycare, focusing on what do we do if our numbers keep dropping? What do we do if we have staff who are out? How do we get subs in a time like this? So there's plenty of stuff to continue to think about as we move forward. Do you have any questions for me on Mae Tech, daycare, summer school?
Any questions, board?
I'd just like to thank both ladies for the work they're doing. It's a different ball game, so thank you very much.
Hey.
We have phenomenal staff.
Yes, thank you. Jackie, you're up.
All right, so I will share where we're at with special education. The Department of Ed really provided several key areas for guidelines that we had to address just beyond getting distance learning to our students. So I'm going to kind of start with our birth to age 2 students. Those are the children that we typically provide services in their natural environment, which is generally the home. So that just got switched to being more virtual over the phone, maybe through a Teams meeting. Staff had to adjust the plans for all of those students then so that it reflected exactly what we were providing. And then part B is for students ages 3 to 21. And so those would be our preschool through high school age students. So we spent a lot of time that first week of our planning, really working with SPED Forms, our paperwork provider, to develop an individualized distance learning plan format so that we could maintain the IEP that needed to be in place for kids at school, but yet have a plan that adequately would reflect exactly what we were proposing to provide to students during this time period. So they did a great job of really meeting our needs. I feel like staff then had to call every single parent and offer a formal IEP team meeting, or parents always have the option to amend the paperwork without that meeting. And to my knowledge, I believe every parent was agreeable to that process. And so that really involved our special education staff visiting with the parent about what we would be proposing to meet all services, and then reflecting that in the individualized distance learning plan. So it was a fair amount of extra paperwork for our staff, but they really did a phenomenal job of tackling it. And after they got through the first couple, I think things went relatively smoothly for them. In general, I mean, the special education staff are using the same platforms that they're using for regular education, whether it be Teams, video modeling, instructional packets, or Seesaw. We did have to work to really balance those contacts with parents, though, because some of our neediest students could very easily end up with having 3 to 5 different providers in special education over the course of a week. And so we tried to really monitor that and work with families to determine how many contacts could they actually work through. And we're still adjusting that, I would say, as parents are reporting to us that maybe it's a little too much, that they need us to back off a little bit. We are providing all services, though: occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech language, developmental adaptive PE. All staff found a way that they were able to get materials home and then connect with either students or parents, depending upon the age of the student, in some manner to provide that instruction. Then we had to talk about appropriate accommodations for our students, because obviously when we had a distance learning environment, that kind of created another hurdle for us that we had to address. And so staff worked with general education staff to really figure out what kinds of supports they might need for students to be successful in that environment. And those are also addressed in those plans. And then paraprofessional support. You know, we have students who routinely rely on that paraprofessional support for reading materials, keeping them on task, redirecting. And so our staff did a great job of figuring out how to provide that virtually as well. So students typically have scheduled meeting times with a paraprofessional to support them. They tried to coordinate it with a para that the student would have been familiar with already during the school day. And our paras, who really didn't do a lot on technology for us, were provided devices and provided training on all of the platforms during that 8-day window. And they've really stepped up and embraced what they needed to embrace and figuring out how to use all of that to best support students. And what I hear is that we have some really awesome things happening between paras and students, and so that's really exciting to hear. One feedback that I did get from a teacher as a parent said to her, as they were talking through the plan and the teacher got to talking about paraprofessional support, and she said, boy, you guys really did think of everything. And so I just think that that affirms that our staff try to really cohesively think about what supports were our kids going to need to be successful. The majority of our IEP and evaluation meetings we had to have in our plan for MDE how we were going to allow those meetings to occur virtually. And so since we do have to have 4 required team members for sure at every IEP meeting, we really couldn't rely on just typical 3-way calling. And so we have it all set up to occur through Microsoft Teams. I did participate in a meeting during the first week of distance learning, and it went very well. I would say in that meeting particularly, parents felt like it was just a typical IEP meeting, except we looked at each other on screens, but staff provided great feedback. Parents had good opportunities to participate. MDE did allow us a little bit of leeway in terms of getting those signatures on paperwork. Typically it has to be signed paperwork, and so they did allow us at this time to be able to have the parent affirm via email that they were in agreement with plans, and we could print that and place it in the file. We've also had some parents who said, well, I'll sign the paper at home and I'll just take a photo with my phone and text it to you, and then we were able to print that. In terms of getting paperwork to parents, you know, we wanted to try and get things as quickly as possible, and so for those who weren't comfortable with encrypted email, we did still send them via US mail, but our Office 365 system does allow us to encrypt emails, and so staff did start to use those with parents who are comfortable with that process so that we could get the paperwork in a more timely manner to them, because typically we would send it home with the student if that was appropriate. Progress monitoring of student goals is still occurring, but I would say this is probably a bigger hurdle for us just because it's really difficult to collect accurate data virtually. You know, staff have played around with student report, parent report, different checklists. And so I feel like this is just one area that we're going to have to continue to try to work through to have accurate data on how they're doing with their goals. We had to report to MDE how we were going to have special education evaluations occur, both re-evaluations and initial. And MDE is allowing us at this point in time to leave evaluations open because there are some components such as academic testing with a Woodcock-Johnson or ability testing with an IQ test that we just can't make happen virtually. And so what's happening right now is our staff write up the plans and we conduct everything that we're able to virtually, such as interviews with parents, teachers, and students, some checklists, reviewing records, and have that all written up. And then we know that when we return to the brick and mortar building, we'll hit those face-to-face testing situations quickly. We have a unique position that we had to address in our behavior coach. She spent the first few weeks really gathering some resources and putting some things together for our staff to use. And now at this time, she's been involved in some meetings between a special ed teacher and parent to perhaps put together a modified behavior plan for the parent to use at home to better support their child in that learning environment, create some incentives for the student to want to participate. She also has even done some in-the-moment modeling that we often have her do here in our school setting, where she did it virtually with a parent at home. And that went very well and was a pretty unique situation for her to be involved in. Overall, staff are reporting that distance learning is going well. They feel like they are having good participation from many students and some really great conversations occurring with parents. They've reported that they see value in continuing to use some of our online platforms in order just to be able to provide some examples and feedback to parents after this is all over with, which I thought was pretty exciting. The students are starting to become more accustomed to the contacts or meetings that are occurring. And they said that they're starting to even be willing to share in this model, maybe some of the struggles that they're facing or some uncertainties that they're facing at home. We have good attendance, but maybe some work completion lacking for a few kids that we're still working to address. Overall, staff have reported that parents have been very supportive of our special education services and pleased with them. And really just a shout out to the staff. They've done a great job. I mean, they had paperwork to address, figure out how to teach students and prepare materials, train paras, get schedules set up for the paras, and our staff have really come out strong and just doing a phenomenal job with us. Questions for me?
Questions, board?
Extremely well done, Jackie. Great job. I'm guessing you're having a conversation with colleagues around the state. You've kind of developed a model. I think you've done extremely well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Next is Beth Ritter. Welcome.
Thank you. All right, today I'm going to focus on our multilingual learners, or our EL students here in the district. Per MDE's requirement, the EL team and I needed to add an appendix to our LIEP plan that included the distance learning piece because we didn't have that included in before this all started. So we worked before we officially went into distance learning during that planning week on the things that we were going to incorporate with the distance learning, and we really split it up by level because it's so different depending on not only the grade level the student is in, but also the level of their language acquisition. So whether they're a newcomer all the way up to advanced, they have very different needs. So I'll start with Parkside. All of the students continue to receive their core instruction from their classroom teacher, which is the same as it was before we went into the distance learning model. Also, all students have been put on the Imagine Learning program. Before we had all of our newcomers and a few beginners on Imagine Learning. Now Imagine Learning has been gracious enough to open it up to all of our students. So we have all students at Parkside and Westside on the program. And what it is it's a program that responds dynamically to how they answer. It's a game format. So the kids really like it, and it helps build and increase their English language development. So it's a really nice program. Depending on their native language, it also offers some native language support. So especially if they're a newcomer just coming into the country, speak very little English, we can set it so it begins in their native language, for example, like Spanish. And then as they do better in the program slowly takes that help or support away in their native language and then goes primarily to English. So it's a great program that we have all of our elementary students on, as well as our newcomers and beginners at the middle school level. And then Parkside EL team, what they decided to do is all packets were being sent home to Parkside students, and they just found that some of it was too difficult. It was hard for them to understand. So they really have worked hard before the packets are sent home to all the students to modify those and make them so the kids can be more successful with the packets, which is really good to see. They're using phone calls, Seesaw, the same thing the classroom teachers are doing. We also are working on getting teams rolled out at Parkside. The EL team really requested to have that. They wanted to see their kids and have a conversation with them, not just over the phone, but have a face-to-face conversation so we can see how their English language development is improving. So thanks to our tech team, they agreed to get that rolled out, and we're in the process of getting that rolled out to our students at Parkside. Westside is the same. They're also receiving their core instruction from their classroom teachers. We decided or just wanted to keep it as similar or as close to what they were doing when we were in regular school or in the building. And they have set up team meetings with the group of students that they were working with before we went to the distance learning model. So those kids are used to working together, and then they meet with those kids at a certain time. The kids know to hop on. They said they're just now starting to get into the balanced literacy with doing a double dose of what's going on in their classroom. It's been slow getting the kids on, but they said the kids are getting much better with it. and really they're enjoying connecting with the students via Teams. Some students are still via phone, whatever. I mean, it's as long as they make contacts with the kids, that's the important part. At the middle school, like I mentioned, we have our newcomer and beginner students all on the Imagine Learning program to continue to increase their English language development. They shared with me last week that the first couple weeks was really troubleshooting, trying to help their kids get onto Teams, get onto Schoology, how do they submit their assignments, all of those things, just the struggles the kids were really having with how this was working and how they were to do it at home. But they did share with me, I met with them on Friday, that finally their kids are now starting to log in on their own. They're not needing them as much, and they feel like they can finally, instead of just trying to troubleshoot problems, they can actually start doing some of the teaching that they've been wanting to do. So seeing some great successes at the middle school level as well. And at the high school level, again, we tried to keep it as consistent as they had before. We do not have any high school students on Imagine Learning because the program is intended primarily for elementary students. They say you can go to the middle level as long as they're a newcomer or a beginner. So therefore, we decided not to put it in with any of our high school students, but they're continuing the EL pull-out classes. Classrooms are still using their Inside and Edge curriculum. We were granted online access to all of the materials, so they're getting their kids set up with that, which we hadn't had that before. Our newcomer math program is continuing. POTOC classes are continuing the same. So really just trying to keep it consistent. And all of the EL team has done a phenomenal job really reaching out to their families, trying to be creative on how to get a hold of them, many different ways, whether it's a phone call, whether it's a text message or through Seesaw, Teams, whatever it may be, they've really done a nice job. And also I'd like to commend our parent-student connectors. They have been very, very busy in this transition time. But they have done a phenomenal job keeping our parents informed, helping our parents with what needs to be done, and have just done a phenomenal job as well. So kudos to them. The good news in all of this is we got our access testing finished. Jeremy and I got it sent off before we went into distance learning. So thankfully we will get our access scores for this year. They're set to come, and as far as I understand, they should still come. It's in the middle of May when they're set to come, so we should still get those scores, which is great. So we'll have a good judgment on how well the students did this year, and we can go from there. And students will be able to exit if they meet exit criteria at the end of the year. So that's exciting that we were able to get that testing in. But other than that, like I said, the team's been working really hard on reaching our families and our learners and doing a great job with it.
Thank you. Board members, any questions?
Hey, Beth, this is Matt. Have you got many students that have fallen through the cracks? I'll just say, I don't know how a better way to put it. But...
Like gone dark, I think is kind of the term.
Right, gone dark. That's the term.
Yeah. When I checked in with them a couple of weeks ago, now that we're in week 4, for the whole district, we only had a handful. But it's my understanding now that we've made contact somehow with each of the students. Now I know now that we've made contact with them, now not all of them are necessarily submitting all of their work and doing all of those things. So we're working through that, but at least we've had some contact with all of our students, which is great.
Good, thanks.
Thanks for that, Beth, which means those kids will not be dropped from our rolls, correct?
Correct, yep.
Good job. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Beth.
Yep.
Todd, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I had originally prepared a presentation for the March board meeting when things suddenly changed. That presentation was centered around our annual technology survey done in January. We had switched to a new format used by the service cooperative called Bright Bites Clarity. Bright Bites Clarity is used by more than 60 districts throughout the state, as well as 1,500 districts in 45 states. So we wanted to use this format to compare ourselves both regionally and nationally. Our overall score had placed us at the top of the proficient range and above the average scores throughout the state of Minnesota and all of teaching and learning. Our highest ranking area in that survey centered around access, meaning teacher and student access to devices and resources at school, and teacher and student access to devices and resources and Wi-Fi at home. I think we can all agree on the importance of this as we look at the current situation. Our one-to-one program started in 2014, and I commend our school board on this as our staff and students have exemplary access. We had also migrated many of our resources to cloud-based tools, so access to these applications are not restricted by location or time. Examples of these include in grades 5 through 12, we use Schoology as a learning management system, or LMS. This system has been set up to sync with our Infinite Campus student information system. So the classes and rosters are already created, automatically created, and they use the same login information as they would for their computer. They call this single sign-on, or SSO. In the past week, I'm showing more than 3,000 total course materials created within Schoology, with around 14,000 work submissions. We were also able to set up our paraprofessionals with notebooks and set up the advisor role for paraprofessionals within Schoology. I think Jackie mentioned this. So they're able to help those individuals that they're working with. Grades 3 through 12 are configured to use Microsoft Teams with School Data Sync, which is also configured to pull in the courses and rosters from our Infinite Campus system, as well as single sign-on. And we're using Teams right now, today. In the past week, I am showing 790 meetings organized, 332 one-to-one calls with over 14,400 channel messages. Grades K through 2 are using iPads configured with the Seesaw application, and we're currently in the process of rolling out Teams to those iPads for a live two-way conversation tool. Seesaw Analytics show 13,109 new items in the last week. These are just a few examples of many distance learning applications in use. A few other steps we took to prepare is that we set up a dedicated help desk email address, helpdesk@isd413.net, a help desk cloud-based phone number with a web portal that we could log into and redirect to individual phones answered by the Media Center assistants, which is a familiar voice and who students would take their device to if they were in school, so they can walk them through some troubleshooting steps. These ladies are doing a great job answering many of the problems over the phone. This team includes Diane Dahl, Jenny Jensen, Tracy Block, Joette Swan, Shelley Moe, and Joan Winter. The technicians set up a single drop-off location for device repairs at the middle school and have done a great job getting them turned around. They're also just wizards at getting things working smoothly throughout the district. Nicholas Esping and Kent Powell are the key individuals here. Karen Longren has been awesome with bringing staff up to speed with applications and guidance on many things. She has trained our staff on Quick Assist, which is built into Windows 10 that allows a user to view and control a remote screen. When referring to tools such as Schoology, Teams, Seesaw, etc., she had quoted to me, "We are using these tools now at a level she did not previously think was possible." This trying period in history has already changed how some educators are thinking about technology as a way to augment learning plans and navigate unexpected hurdles like snow days, for instance, in the future. I think snow days now will look a lot different. I welcome any questions.
Todd, thank you again for all your leadership with all of our technology. Going back to 2014, you've been our leader with all of that. So thank you. We're blessed to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a great team effort.
Outstanding. Thank you, Todd. Jeremy, you're up.
Hi, everyone. I think Todd just mentioned, a lot with the team and different people that are really making this all happen. And that's the first thing I want to highlight too, is we really do have a great team that's really pulled together and put some things together to make this time work for our kids, make connections, and really those relationships and stuff are key. And that's happening. And you've heard all these other examples, and Scott asked if I want to speak tonight, and happy to share a little bit of an update. And the group that's talked has shared really everything, almost everything that I had to share with you. So I don't have a lot of new things to share, just a couple things that are maybe different on my plate that I'm working on, other than what you've heard from technology and EL and SPED and the principals. All talked about the classroom stuff last week too. But one of the questions that's coming up a lot in my office is about teacher growth and development, teacher development and evaluation plan, looking at, and QComp, looking at those goals, the SKIP goals and the personal goals, and some of that, how that's going to work this spring. We have a lot of things that are based off of spring NWA scores, and we're not giving NWA's tests this spring. We won't have access to do that remotely. So we got some guidance from the state here just recently that we're starting to go through. And tomorrow, actually, we have a meeting set up with the EA representatives, that QComp oversight committee. So we'll start going through those guidelines from the state and laying out kind of how we can do this in the future, or do that for this year, and have some measures of student growth and the different pieces with PLCs and QComp that are all tied to that are an important piece of what we do and what we measure each year too, and recognizing the fact that we had 3/4 of the year prior to COVID-19 kind of hitting and throwing us for a loop with things there. So look forward to share updates with that as we have some things together too, but we are giving some thought to how do we do those measures for the remainder of this year, because things do look different right now than they have, and we just don't have access to all the same tools that we had before with some of this. So that kind of brings me to the piece I want to share. Tricia, if you could put up that dashboard for me. We've been working on a success dashboard, so thinking about all the pieces with school closure that we're doing, and how do we know how it's going kind of from one week to the next. Started last week as with the measure with this, so student attendance is a big piece. I think a lot of the principals talked about that at their site and what they're doing. Wanted a district-wide overview too. So the baseline you see listed, and the ones we have a baseline measure, is really week 2. And then every week going forward, we'll look at what that week looks like and how it compares to the week before. So if we should see a dip or big spike in one area or another, we can really kind of narrow into that, what's going on and what are we missing, or what's, what do we see? What is the data showing us? We've always said we're data driven, and we wanted to have some data around the different pieces for school closure. So it's attendance, looking at not just all students, but also some of those demographics, the SPED students, the EL students, and free and reduced students. And, is there one group that we're having a harder time connecting with or not? And, are we consistent from one week to the next? This is overall as a district, and we can pull each building individually as well. And I'll just kind of walk through the areas, and you can ask questions that you might have. Scroll down, Todd talked about a little bit of the technology tools we're using. We really are in a good spot with that. We had all these great tools in place that we were using prior to this, and now how we can use them in this, it's changed, but it really set a strong foundation for us where students are comfortable with. Parkside was using Seesaw before, so being able to use that I watched my kindergartner come home, and he's familiar with that tool. He can submit work and send it back to his teacher. Like, I don't know what buttons to hit, and he's comfortable with it. So I think that's really great evidence of what our teachers are doing with these things and how they can take those tools they know and apply them. Looking at the number of posts that are going on, considering the number of kids in the site, there's a lot of posts going back and forth on there. And we'll track this each week too, and is each tool working? And it was one of the questions somebody had last time at the board meeting is, are the tools working like they're supposed to, or some of these tools are they down, or the website's down, or that sort of thing. So we're going to track how many messages and how many meetings are taking place, and are things getting submitted and uploaded there. So some pieces with that. There are a couple measures here that are kind of grayed out. Trish, if you want to scroll down a little bit more, those grayed out areas, so those are going to be measured by a survey that we're doing, a district-wide survey. We did some initial things before this all started. We've got a survey that will be coming out, I think, later this evening or tomorrow that'll come out, and we'll pull some measures off of that. And then at the end of the year, again, for some of these pieces, that's why those are blank right now. Todd mentioned the technology hotlines, looking at the number of calls that we're getting. That's over the course of that week. So we had 67 calls in week 2, and we had 80 calls last week that those ladies are covering and making sure that kids with technology issues are getting those answered. So make sure those hotlines are up and available for kids. That number is actually open from 8 in the morning until 8 at night, 5 days a week. So great resource for our families to have access to. The number of daily meals, that's a big piece too of families that are struggling right now with getting food for the kids and making sure that we have that available. Last week, we averaged over 1,000 meals a day that we served for that. That's just amazing, that number of meals coming out. And I would anticipate as the weather continues to get nicer and it gets easier for kids to get here and such, that number will continue to grow. It seems to be higher every day. So it's fun to see that number go up too. The childcare is a big piece, watching where we at with numbers in there. Remains fairly consistent. Last week was a little smaller week too, but we averaged 25 kids a day in the childcare. The week before was 28, and we have 27 staff working there. We have some more measures around the distance learning with the survey that we'll do. And at the bottom is the learning goals and measuring student academic growth as well. Some of that we won't have a good measure until near the end of the year, but we've talked about the 3-week checks. Like high school's been doing that consistently anyway. That will continue through this, number of students passing classes. And then some of those other pieces looking at the common assessments or the reflection pieces that would come through part of what we're going to discuss tomorrow with the teacher development evaluation and the Q-Comp plans and the goals around those things. So, and some measures around the different pieces we have that we're collecting. Open any questions you guys have for me.
Any questions, board members? Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Moving on to our consent agenda, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any questions? Hearing none, please vote. Is approved. Financials, motion to approve the financials. Do we have a second?
I second.
Any questions?
I just wanted to point out a couple of things in the bills. We had a bill from Suster Construction for $19,275. That's for a baseball dugout. A majority of that is covered by a grant that the Baseball Association was able to obtain through the Twins. And then also MABA is covering some of that expenditure. And then also there's a bill for $16,986 from an athletic equipment. That was the high school gym curtain. That was part of the insurance recovery from the fire damage. So that's actually paid for, or we're reimbursed from the insurance company for that. And then the last one, just we received a bill from Southwest State SMSU for $51,646, and that's for the spring PSEO credits.
Very good. Any questions, board? Hearing none, please vote. It is approved. Treasurer's report, anything you'd like to add?
Nope, I really didn't have anything that stuck out after the February board meeting. I just did a quick analysis of the expenditures, and everything looks to be on point.
Very good, thank you. Board forum, board members, anybody have anything they'd like to bring up?
Jeff, this is Bill. I just want to make a comment and say a huge thank you to all of the staff that participated in Friday night's parade. That was unbelievable. I don't think I've ever sat through a parade with a tear in my eye the whole time, but our community needed that. Parents, teachers, certainly the students. So thank you to everybody that pulled that off. That was a pretty cool thing to see.
I agree. It was wonderful. Any other board members? Thank you. Moving on to our administrator's report.
I'll just highlight a couple things from each report for you. Hopefully you've had a chance to read them. In Tiffany's report, she shared that the placement letters for preschool next year have been mailed out. We're going to still take a look and see if there's a way to maybe open up some more seats, but everything's kind of been put on hold, as you well know. Darcy's report had some information about parent survey results at Parkside for distance learning, and I'd encourage you to take a look at those. In Eric's report, there was some site leadership team feedback that he shared about distance learning. And then, excuse me, because we're not able to do sort of that orientation with this year's second graders who will be third graders next year in person, there's work going on right now for an orientation video, sort of the virtual piece that part of the world we've been living in for however long it's been now. Mary Kay's report has a lot of information about distance learning in it. And also, she had done a nice job, I thought, because I've had a lot of questions in my own mind about what are we doing with students who are struggling? And you heard some of that, I think, today or earlier from the 6 staff members who spoke. But Mary Kay's report talks about counselors and nurses and just some of the staff who are doing some interventions and really providing good quality support for students. And then she also shared some of the student survey results, which was nice to look at. Brian's report also had distance learning information, and including student attendance and the % of students passing. He also shared, and I know this has also been a question that I've received a lot, that they are looking at different ideas for certain end of the year events and activities, including but not limited to the scholarship banquet, academic honors assembly, certainly graduation, National Honor Society, Link Crew selection, so on and so forth. So that is happening. I think everybody's kind of waiting for the governor to make his decision, and I'll talk about that actually at the end of my report. Amanda, in her report, shared that she is continuing to work on summer programming. I'm guessing it's going to look a little different this year than it has in previous years, but we still need to have her work on that and have things set up so that when summer rolls around, we're ready to go. And she also shared some distance learning information and survey responses. Bruce's report, he shared some really nice examples about some ways that spring coaches are staying in touch with their student athletes or students. And then also he listed, and it was pretty overwhelming actually, the number of activities or events that have been postponed or canceled just in the last month, essentially from March 15th until April 15th. Jeremy shared a lot of really good information already, but he also touched on in his report the focus that there's being given to teacher development and evaluation, QComp, school closure. He put that scorecard up there. We're continuing to work on hiring for the positions that are open right now, professional development and other things. Beth, in her report, shared that she's back, if you will, to doing the 2 new teacher center mentoring with the 8 teachers that she's been working with this year, and also shared some written information about distance learning for multilingual learners. In Jackie's report, distance learning information and sort of some narratives about how things were going from a staff perspective. Also feedback and comments just generally related to distance learning. Couple things, 4 things in my report. A lot of things about the school closure, not just distance learning. I referenced, and I'm sure I missed somebody or left somebody out, but just the number of partners that we're fortunate to be able to work with, Taher, Southwest Coaches, Pride in the Tiger Foundation, Marshall Community Services, Lyon County, the Marshall Police Department, SMSU, the City of Marshall, Greater Minnesota, our parents. The list just goes on because these things don't happen without a lot of collaboration and ideas and flexibility. So all of those partnerships are super important, and any opportunity we have to reach out to those folks and say thank you is a good thing. I think you heard from the 6 folks that spoke earlier and shared information and emphasis on what a great job their staff have done and our staff have done, and that definitely, I'll say it again and probably many more times before this is through, but our students and our parents and staff have I won't say embrace this because that's probably a too large a word to use. Some maybe have, but have accepted it and realized that it's what we need to do right now. And that's been very appreciated, as well as the efforts that everybody has put forth, especially our staff. And then one thing I wanted to mention, I don't know if you heard Governor Walz on WCCO this morning, and this is a quote. The very first question that he was asked is, what are the chances that students will be able to come back to school and or spring sports will take place? And quote, unfortunately, I don't think so. So we know that, and it's just a matter of time. I would speculate maybe even this week that we hear that information from him. But right now, we know that school is closed through May 4th, and we'll go from there. So if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Dion.
Thanks, Scott. Just a couple of things in my report I just wanted to cover because it's been a while since we've talked about them. The Safe School Grant, both of the projects at the middle school and West Side are completed. The equipment and the work's been verified. Thanks to Todd for helping to go through those steps to make sure everything's working correctly. All the expenditures to date for the contractors have been paid, and we've been reimbursed from MDE. We're just waiting for a couple of final bills to close this out and get reimbursed for those final bills. Another thing, the roof project at Parkside Middle School, I just included a couple of pictures in the attachment just to kind of show you guys what sections are being replaced. There's 3 at Parkside and 8 at the middle school. We bid on that last spring, I believe it was. They'll be completing that this summer by the end of August. And then did want to let you guys know that we're making sure that Tremco, who's doing our roofing project, is working close with Susner Construction over at Parkside, because we'll be having the addition put on along with some roofing at Parkside. We just want to make sure that the two are collaborating well. And then the carpet project at Parkside, we were able to start that. I believe he's got 4 or 5 rooms done, and we'll stay clear of the childcare at Parkside, but it's good to get some of that done and out of the way before, or ahead of schedule, actually. So if you have any questions, let me know.
Questions, board members? Thank you. Moving on to our school board students.
To me, I was supposed to read the first one, but I'll go ahead and read it. So we basically kind of just asked the other buildings of like what kind of successes they're going through right now regarding distance learning. So for the high school, attendance, growth with teachers, and self-discipline and self-management skills with students are one of their successes they're seeing. And then for the middle school, attendance, they have an average of 97% of attendance, and technology and and staff implementing online teaching. And then
Mae Tech. The things that are going well are the students are learning to organize and be online learners, and the staff is gaining knowledge about how they deliver and connect with the students.
At the West Side, almost all students are connecting with their teachers and classmates during this morning check-ins. And on related note, attendance has been very good. Staff is working to collaborate and come together during this difficult time. We will be able to use what we have learned during distance learning to improve e-learning, to use more technology in the classroom.
Adapting to being at home and studying, you guys. Missing your friends?
Yeah.
That's what I've heard.
Before we move on to our discussion items, I just wanted to say that our administrators and teaching staff are a step above superheroes. They could have taken the situation and just throw their hands up in the air and says, what can we do, and walk away. But it seems like they've come through with every obstacle and found a way to be successful. And I can't say thank you enough to them. Moving on to our
I would agree to what you're saying, Jeff. I think what's happening in Marshall Public Schools would be a model for all school districts in our state, where how our staff have stepped up to serve our parents and kids and each other. I just think it's just exemplary, and I appreciate it very much, as we all do.
Moving on to our discussion items, our first review of policies 613 through 616. Were there any questions? We'll move on to our board action items. The first action item is resolution approving the sale of refunding bond 2015C. Motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion?
I believe Jody's on with us to kind of go over a summary of the sale.
Thanks, Dion. You should have, in addition to the resolution, you should have a sale day report. Is that something you can all access? I can just highlight a few things from the report. Looks like Tricia is going to open it up. Okay, so if you go to the first page, just a few things to point out on this page. You're issuing these bonds to take advantage of lower interest rates that are available now as compared to when the bonds were issued in 2015. So you aren't able to keep the money for other areas of your budget, but you are required to pass the savings on to your taxpayers in the form of reduced debt service levies in the future, which I'm sure they will appreciate. So the two ratings that were assigned are listed there, and thanks to both Dion and Scott for participating in the rating process. That was really helpful. They represented your district very well and answered all the questions that Moody's had. We did get 6 bids, so you'll see the low bidder was UMB Bank out of Kansas City. We'll go through the bid tab in just a minute, but the bids ranged from about 1.29% to just under 2%. And the interest difference between that spread then is about $118,000. So then, Tricia, if you'll just scroll to the notes underneath that summary of the sale results, they're right there. So we have seen interest rates that have been very volatile over the last few weeks, and Dion and I have been in touch quite a bit. He'll probably be happy not to hear from me over the next few weeks. But we were able to, we had scheduled the bond sale on April 15th, and that happened to be the lowest day in the market over the last few weeks. So that worked out very well for us. So the true interest cost rate was a 1.29%. The pre-sale report that we provided to you in March had an estimate of 1.33. So we're a little bit under that, which then allowed us to capture more savings. So he had estimated savings of about $97,000, and we will actually have savings of about 107,000. You did approve a parameters resolution, and we're well in excess of those parameters in terms of the savings. So you'll see on the next page that the board clerk and Dion have already signed the proposal form on behalf of the district. So the resolution before you tonight is to ratify that sale. And then I'll just quickly walk through the attachments. So that first attachment is the bid tab. And you'll see again, interest from throughout the country, which was great to see. For a while, we were getting a limited number of bids. So getting 6 bids was great. UMB, again, at the low rate. Piper Sandler, which used to be Piper Jaffray out of Minneapolis, was very close to UMB. And then a little bit above that, Northland and Baird were pretty close together. And then finally, Stiefel Nicholas out of Birmingham, Alabama, and BNY Mellon Capital Management out of Pennsylvania. So the next couple of schedules are just updates to the schedules that we provided you with the pre-sale report with the sale results now. The next page that Tricia is getting to, the prior original debt service, is the debt service schedule that you are currently committed to. And then following that is the new debt service schedule with lower interest rates. And then our favorite page should be following this one, I believe, which shows the savings. So savings in excess of 100,000, which we were hoping to see. And so that will be about 20,000, just under $20,000 annually over the next 6 years for this bond issue. And then following the financial schedules, Moody's issues 2 reports. So one is a press release, and you'll see the ratings that they assigned, and in their rationale, the first thing that they mention is your solid and stable financial position that's supported by enrollment growth. So they were happy to see that. There are some references in the report which are new. That second paragraph there, you can see about the coronavirus. So they are adding some language related to that. And then a little bit of information about the credit enhancement program and that rating, and then factors that could lead to an upgrade and a downgrade. And the next page, really the only thing to point out is that in use of proceeds is the original bonds that were issued in 2015 were issued to finance indoor air quality projects at the middle school. After that, then there is some boilerplate language, and then the detailed credit opinion starts on attachments page 11. And again, at the beginning of the report, it's very similar information to what was included in the press release. Following that overall information, there is a table of key indicators, and then lots of the detailed information that we talked with Moody's about as part of the conference call. And finally, at the very end of the report, they give a scorecard. And so kind of shows the different rating factors that they were looking at, and then ultimately what the assigned rating was at a single A1. So that is on attachments page 16. Right there. And that is the end. And I know that you have the resolution before you. It includes, the resolution states it's a special meeting. We'll update that to show that it's a regular meeting tonight. And there's also a little bit of information that Tom Deans, your bond attorney, wants to include in the resolution, just stating that the meeting was held by phone or other means in accordance with Minnesota statute. So that language is getting added into all of the resolutions that are now being held by video conference.
Very nice. Good work. Board members, any questions? I always like it when you can save us money.
We love when we can save money.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're happy that it turned out so well. We definitely appreciate the opportunity to be of service to you again. And again, thanks to Dion and Scott for, they've had a lot on their plates, and we certainly appreciate them taking the time to work through this process with us too.
Very good. Thank you. We'll go ahead and call for a vote. It is approved.
Great. Thanks again.
Thank you. Our next action item is approval to refund or credit spring activities fees that have been paid. Motion to approve. Do we have a second? Any discussion?
Just a note, and I think it's in the information there that, we'd have to prorate it in the event that there were to be a spring season. We anticipate that there won't be, but once that decision is made, then we'll go ahead and proceed with refunds or carrying them over to next year.
Very good. Any questions, board members? Hearing none, we'll vote. It is approved. Our next action item is approval to refund Little Cubs 3's tuition during time of distance learning. Motion, do I have a second? Second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. It is approved. Our next action item is approval of agreement with the Greater Minnesota Family Services. Motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll
Need a
second.
second. Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote. It is approved. Thank you, board members. Meeting's over.
Thank you, Jeff. You did well.
Thank you.